You know, I'm a little bit confounded by that, I'll be honest. The wall works. We have evidence and figures that show that. When the wall went up in Yuma and San Diego, the illegal entries went down 95%. And I must remind the viewers that in 2006, it was a bipartisan approach to securing our country. So I can't speak for the Democrats as to why they're suddenly against it, but it's been bipartisan before. It's needed. It works. And I think we've been clear and heard from the men and women that are on the front lines that that is what they need as part of their toolkit to secure our borders.
Here's Ranking Democrat Chuck Schumer talking about just that. Listen.
Oh, no, Mr. President. You campaigned on a wall that Mexico would pay for. We're waiting. But again, to take away the things that are needed to protect the border for a symbolic and ineffective political gesture, wrong. There is nothing to this but politics. President Trump is fighting for an empty symbol rather than smart policy that will actually produce better security at our borders.
Even some Republicans, Secretary, are saying they don't really know what this wall looks like and call it rhetoric. Jeff Flake saying that the president drilled down a bit on the details of that border wall, but he said this won't be a 2,000-mile wall. It'll be 700 to 800 miles. What actual details can you tell us about that wall?
Sure. The proposal that we've been discussing right now is 700 miles over the next 10 years. And I think the important details that we've been working on with Congress is really digging in on the border and understanding where the threat is, what we need, taking into consideration the unique geographical aspects of the wall. As you know, one part of the wall, one part of the border is not like another. So we need to be very clear that perhaps different solutions are needed in different places. And in some places, I think the president's been quite clear we don't need a wall. So the information that we've been providing to Congress is all driven from the needs and requirements on the front lines. And it specifies, here's the threat, here's where we need the wall system. And I do want to clarify the wall system is not just the infrastructure, but it's the technology and personnel we need to make that aspect of border security function effectively. And we've heard the president talk a lot in recent days on chain migration and the visa lottery system. Where do you stand on both of those issues? Well, I think what the president has said in recent months, unfortunately, we've seen examples of attacks in our homeland from folks who came here under either the visa lottery program or as part of chain migration. And I think the president is rightly concerned for the security of the American people. And he feels that as we talk about securing the border and securing our countrymen, we must look at these programs that are full of fraud and abuse and don't necessarily allow us to provide that security. You know, it's one thing when we look at that meeting, the bicameral meeting, congressmen, congresswomen, senators were in that room, obviously, with the president, members of the president's cabinet. It's one thing to talk about getting Democrats and Republicans on board and on the same page when it comes to immigration reform. But is everybody within the president's team, within his own administration, are you all on board with how to proceed with immigration reform? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the president has been very clear. He's given us guidance. We are all on board, and we're all ready to roll up sleeves. I certainly am willing to talk to anyone and everyone from Congress who's willing to talk about this to find an enduring solution. Secretary, you've only been on the job for a short time so far. How is it going, by the way? It's going well. I mean, it is my great privilege to be able to support the men and women of this country that work at DHS. They have a very dangerous job, and I couldn't be more thrilled to make it my duty to get them the authorities and resources they need to do what Congress and the American people have asked us to do, which is to secure our homeland. I've got to leave it there, Secretary, but a few seconds. Are you optimistic that a deal will get done? I will continue to be optimistic, and I will certainly do everything that I can do to get the deal done. We need it. It's time. We're very thankful that you came on the program this morning. A lot going on and an ambitious agenda for this administration in the new year. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you. My pleasure.
Between that conversation and Mike McCall of an hour ago, this debate, this issue is being defined literally in public before our eyes. Mm-hmm. We need to get there. Whether or not they can ultimately get it done is, well, that's what we're here for. Got a big job to do. They all do. Whether or not it happens as we watch. Meanwhile, now, at the end of that marathon meeting yesterday, you had this. President Trump was asked about Oprah Winfrey. His answer.
Hey, can you mute Oprah, by the way? Yeah, Oprah would be a lot of fun. I know her very well. You know, I did one of her last shows.
A lot of fun. How about that, America? Who wins in a clash of television titans?
Plus, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee going against Republicans and releasing testimony given by the co-founder of the group behind that unverified Trump dossier. A complete breakdown on the implications of this move.
Also, Sandra, parts of California scorched by fire, now dealing with deadly mudslides. An update on the search for survivors amid this devastation left behind.
I panicked. I mean, they were both asleep, and I was in my boots, and I just said, "There's mud in the driveway. There's mud in the driveway."
Oprah would be a lot of fun. I know her very well. You know, I did one of her last shows. She had Donald Trump. This is before politics. Her last week, and she had Donald Trump, and my family was very nice. No, I like Oprah. I don't think she's going to run. I don't think she's going to run. I know her very well.
What a moment there. President Trump weighing in on a potential face-off between him and Oprah Winfrey in the 2020 presidential election. Mr. Trump saying yesterday he doesn't think the media mogul will run, but if she does, he'll win. Guy Benson is the political editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. Guy, that was at least a little fun way to end that meeting, right? I mean, he was asked about it, and he weighed in.
So much real news and interesting content in that meeting. And then at the very end, hey, what about Oprah? America needs to know, Mr. President, your thoughts on a potential square-off with Oprah Winfrey in 2020. And I think he said the best thing that he possibly could have. I like her. I know her. I would beat her if she ran, but I don't think she's going to run. Perfectly fine answer. And here we are talking about it.
You think she's going to run, Guy?
You know, there have been some mixed signals on this. So she's saying publicly, and her people are saying publicly, no, she's not going to do it. That's what she said after the Golden Globes when she was asked. But Stedman, her longtime companion and partner, said, and there's a quote out there in public saying, it's up to the people, but she would totally do it or definitely do it, something along those lines. And there's a report out there from another network that there are close confidants of Oprah's who say she's seriously looking at it. And just from a political standpoint, you look at her self-made billions, you look at her universal name recognition. She and Trump are similar, at least in that regard, and sort of a newfound sense that someone who's super, super famous can run and succeed in American politics. It would make sense if she has it in the back of her mind. It's something she's always thought about doing. Why not?
I don't know if she's get a read on Democrats and how they feel about it. You know, I mean, we had Marie Harf on the couch and outnumbered yesterday, and I kept asking her about it. She said she didn't want to talk about it. I really can't get a sense for if Democrats like this idea or not.
I mean, it seemed like a lot of the left overall was very taken by Oprah's speech at that awards ceremony. I thought overall it was a very good speech, but, you know, I'm not clamoring for Oprah to run for president. I think people... This might be an indication, maybe Marie didn't want to talk about it because it detracts from discussions of some of the serious politicians that are lining up to run for president in 2020. Are there Democrats and liberals out there throughout the country who think that maybe that bench is a little bit weak and they'd rather go for someone with major star power like an Oprah, who, by the way, has very good overall favorability numbers with the American people, almost stratospheric compared certainly to where Donald Trump started when he ran and endeavored to run for president all the way back in 2015.
To be fair, Marie's on the couch again today at noon. I'll make sure I ask her about it again.
Press her further on this. This is a crucial point.
I will indeed. Moving on, Bannon out at Breitbart. Your thoughts this morning on that?
Bannon's out everywhere, it seems. You know, he's out at the White House. Now he's sloppy Steve, according to the President of the United States. He put out this sheepish apology. Breitbart's kicked him to the curb. He's got some billionaires who've backed him. They're distancing themselves and cutting off the spigot. It was a comprehensive act of self-immolation, and I don't know what the next step is for Mr. Bannon, but he has burned a lot of bridges and did so while also helping to lose an unlosable Senate seat in Alabama, which is an extraordinary feat.
A lot going on this morning.
Always.
Guy, I know it's tough sometimes to decide where to even begin, but that was a heck of a meeting yesterday, wasn't it?
You know, I've never seen anything like that, and I think people who've been in this town much longer than I have were sort of glued to their television saying, this is, on some level, a performance and strategic play by the White House. I think it was a smart strategic play by the White House, but it was also a civic service we got to see our elected representatives from two branches of government sitting down and discussing a serious issue basically on live television in real time and glean some true insights into how that debate is taking shape. It was really cool.
Certainly changed the conversation a little bit, at least for now. Guy Benson, always good to see you. Thank you.
He's very right about that last point. I mean, even our colleagues here and across the network landscape, how surprised they were to have that opportunity yesterday. And I wonder at what point does that opportunity come back?
Meaning, are the cameras going to roll on future
I agree
meetings?
with Guy. I loved watching that. I was hanging on every word.
Yeah. Good. That means you were watching outnumbered.
Indeed, I was. Yes. Talk to Marie about that. Okay. An urgent warning about digital danger. The head of the FBI arguing against unbreakable encryption on your smartphone. Why he is calling an urgent public safety issue today. Coming up.
Plus, North and South Korea coming to the table in a bid to ease tensions. Will anything else come out of those talks?
The next steps would be denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is our #1 priority, and certainly what we would like to see. We are in very close contacts with our South Korean allies about these conversations.
Right now, speaking at this conference, cybersecurity conference here in New York. Now, yesterday, the FBI director, Christopher Wray, he was there calling this unbreakable encryption on a smartphone an urgent public safety issue. Buck Sexton, former CIA officer, joins me now, and good morning to you, Buck.
Good to see you.
You just said that this is a tough issue, so let's go ahead and explore this. The public was drawn to this story during the San Bernardino massacre of December 2015. And since that time, whether it's technology companies or lawmakers or the FBI director, they're trying to figure out a way how we can strike a balance. Don't give away the keys to the store because the hackers could get into your phone. That's not right. But still, you have federal authorities who are trying to figure out a way to unscramble these messages so they can do their job. So where do you come down on all of that?
There are strong arguments on both sides here, Bill. You have on one end people saying the going dark problem, meaning that you can't get access to this, even if you're law enforcement, even with a court order to this information, is getting worse. And that is true. The technology is getting better. The encryption is getting stronger. The applications, its uses, and its proliferation is increasing. So that makes the law enforcement problem of going dark, the bad guys being able to hide their information, a bigger problem over time, not a smaller one. But on the other side of it, you've got the tech companies saying, look, we can create back doors here for what would be an enormous security vulnerability, because even if, let's say, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, some of these big companies say, well, we'll just keep the encryption, we'll keep the magic key to ourselves. It'll only be for law enforcement, only for the court orders that may come. The problem is that skilled hackers may be able to exploit that as well. So you would be mandating, if this went to the legislative level, that companies have to create vulnerabilities in security, which is at the heart of what these companies are trying to do.
And that would be up to Congress to go ahead and do that. Let me play a little bit of Christopher Wray, because I think the point he makes toward the end is quite relevant. Watch this.
While the FBI and law enforcement happen to be on the front lines of this problem, this is, make no mistake, this is an urgent public safety issue for everybody in this room and your loved ones. Because as horrifying as 7,800 in a year sounds or should sound to you, it's going to be a lot worse in just a couple of years if I'm back up here again speaking at this conference. And so we have to find a responsible solution.
The 7,800 refers to the number of cases over the last calendar year. I do believe that's the point he was making there. But it will be worse in a couple of years. So we're sitting here in 2018. If we get hit again, we're back having the same conversation. Well, so what to do?
You have to look at what the possible fix would be, because even if you were to get agreement from companies, and BlackBerry, for example, has said our security concerns, or rather our commitment to privacy does not extend to criminals. They said that in the past. Some companies have willingly said that they will make these changes. But if you do mandate them, then we have to wonder, well, a company will come along that says, you know what, we don't play that game with the government. We'll keep your data secure. We will make the best encryption possible. No backdoors, no magic keys.
So then you would certainly certainly need a law to get around that scenario.
And then are you going to be outlawing apps and future communication technology as it comes along? There is an innovation versus security and privacy dilemma here that I do think Congress is going to have to step in on, because the FBI right now and various federal all law enforcement agencies in this country are going to be fighting a losing battle if they just keep saying this is getting worse, because the problem keeps changing.
You and I have had this conversation before, and we're having it today, and it's going to happen again.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a tough one.
All right. Figure it out. Bring you back.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Buck Sexton. You bet. Sandra, what's next?
A Democratic senator going against the wishes of her Republican colleagues and releasing testimony on that unverified Trump dossier.
What I do know and what I found most interesting about what I've been able to read thus far is the fact that Glenn Simpson said Christopher Steele told him the FBI had another source. How did Christopher Steele know that? Did the FBI tell him?
We will tell you what the founder of Fusion GPS as we get brand new reaction from the top Republican on that committee.
Also, in a moment when the president nominated Judge Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court, it certainly was a high-profile announcement. But now the president might be reshaping the judiciary system in a more substantial way. We shall explain.
Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein making waves in the Russia investigation after releasing the transcript from a closed-door interview with Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson. That's the firm behind the anti-Trump dossier. Congressman Pete King came on this morning slamming the move in our last hour.
I have no idea why Dianne Feinstein did that. It proved absolutely nothing. Generally, when an investigation is going on, you do keep it secret so that other witnesses don't know what someone else is saying. But no one was being kept away from anyone here. The fact is the Trump dossier has so far been absolutely nothing. There's nothing to it at all.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington and following all this for us. Good morning, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Sandra. A short time ago, we heard from the Judiciary Committee's Republican Chairman Chuck Grassley, who weighed in on the decision of the senior Democrat Dianne Feinstein to release the transcript on her own.
And these transcripts would have been released eventually anyway, but I think it does create some problems. For instance, when you're getting people to voluntarily come to you, it may make a lot of people a little more reserved about whether or not they want to cooperate.
According to the transcript, the co-founder of Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, told Senate investigators former British spy Christopher Steele went to the FBI in July 2016, the same month the Bureau opened its Russia investigation, and then again in September 2016 because Steele feared candidate Trump could be blackmailed. Simpson said Steele went further, claiming the FBI had a human source to corroborate. They, the FBI, believe Chris's information might be credible because they had other intelligence that indicated the same thing, and one of those pieces of intelligence was a human source from inside the Trump organization. But this was quickly disputed by sources close to Simpson, who said he was talking about intelligence from the Australian ambassador about a Trump campaign aide, George Papadopoulos. On Fox, a member of the House Government Oversight Committee said last night that Steele's relationship with the FBI and the degree to which they shared information needs to be further explored. Sandra.
Catherine, and the FBI's involvement in the dossier wasn't the only alarming thing about this testimony, was it?
Well, in the transcript, the lawyer for Fusion GPS, Joshua Levy, claimed an individual was dead after the dossier was published a year ago today. He said in part, Simpson, wants to be very careful to protect his sources. Somebody's already been killed as a result of the publication of this dossier, and no harm should come to anybody related to this honest work. But that claim conflicts with the firm's own tactics before the presidential election, where Simpson and Steele briefed a half-dozen American media outlets to get the dossier into the public square. A member of the House Judiciary Committee accused Fusion GPS of spreading misinformation and using tactics similar to Moscow.
Here we see Fusion GPS, the entity paid by the Democratic Party, working with the FBI, utilizing the very same tools that the Russian Federation uses to disrupt democracy around the world.
Through the transcript, Fusion and its lawyer Joshua Levy say they stand behind the integrity of their work. Sandra.
Catherine, thank you for your reporting.
You're welcome.
For more on all this and where we're now headed, Brad Whiteman, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush, Richard Fowler, radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, start your engines. Good morning to both of you and Happy New Year. So the human source may have been two guys talking at a fancy hotel in London over drinks. Also in this transcript, it reveals that someone's dead. We don't know who that someone is. Is it in the U.S.? Is it in England? Is it in Russia? Who knows? do not have a definitive answer on that. And Dianne Feinstein, go ahead and put it out in the public without regard to her colleague, Chuck Grassley. I don't know where that relationship goes. But Brad, here I think is the question. What did the release of the transcript tell us about the verification of the dossier or Trump-Russia connections? Has it advanced the story or not?
Not at all. We know what we know. And it's unfortunate that Dianne Feinstein, on her own, unilaterally, before the Senate investigation was concluded, decided to dump this on the public. But this is a bad spy novel. Here's some things we do know. Fusion GPS was a Democratic arm of the DNC in the Clinton campaign to get dirt on Donald Trump. They hired a British intelligence officer. The British intelligence officer in turn used his contacts in Russia, probably paid for a lot of the information. And then to add his value, that of the British intelligence agent, Steele, he goes to the FBI and cooperates with the FBI to try and magnify the dossier on Trump and get them working on the case. This is really bad, not only in the substance of there's nothing there for Trump liability and collusion, but if anything, it shows collusion between the Democrats relying on a British agent who's relying on Russian intelligence people, none of this of which can be verified or corroborated. This stinks from top to bottom.
Maybe in the end that's the story, but right now we don't know. Now, Richard, what do you think about the release of this transcript, and whether or not for you it answers any questions?
So number one, I'm not sure if I would have went about it this way. I'm not sure if this has been my methodology, but let's be very clear. Mr. Simpson did request in the New York Times op-ed for his transcript to be released. Dianne Feinstein waited for Chuck Grassley to release it. He did not, so she took it on herself to release it. Now, what Chuck Grassley's argument is, this is going to stop witnesses from coming down and testifying in front of us. I don't think that argument is true just because this witness asked for, very publicly, his information to be released, number one. Number two, to Brad's spin on this story, which is a heck of a spin. I don't quite believe that. Here's the thing. I don't know what in this dossier is true, what's not in this dossier is true. But this once again speaks to the fact that I don't think President Trump can get a fair hearing on Capitol Hill because there's so much political rancor. I think there's some Democrats who want to impeach him. There are other Democrats who want to get to the bottom of it, like folks on the Select Intelligence Committee. And you have Republicans who are doing everything to cover for this president. I think the most upright and fair investigation that we've seen over the past 11, now 12 months, has been the investigation, or less than 12 months, 9 months rather, is the investigation that's being undertaken by Mueller and the special counsel's office. And what they're pointing out is not only has Papadopoulos pled guilty, but the national security advisors also pled guilty, as well as Trump's campaign chairman has been indicted, as well as one of his associates has been indicted. And this is information that speaks to things that they have done.
We can't square the circle on that yet, though.
Well, they have been indicted, and there's been 2 guilty pleas. Those are facts.
We don't have the full picture yet of all of that stuff.
I completely agree.
We do have this tweet last hour. What was it, 20 minutes ago? The fact that Sneaky Dianne Feinstein, here we go. Look out, Sloppy Steve. Sneaky Dianne Feinstein, who has on numerous occasions stated that collusion between Trump and Russia has not been found, would release testimony in such an underhanded and possible illegal way, totally without authorization, is a disgrace. Must have tough primary. All right. So that from the White House. Ultimately, Brad, here's, I think, what the American people need to know. What are you using in order to unmask the names of Americans? And is that information, is it legitimate or not? And if it's the former, we've got a world of trouble in America, and we need to figure this out. Otherwise, people like Senator Rand Paul will filibuster over the next week and a half. The reauthorization of the FISA law. We need to know what our government's doing with this information. Go.
And if anything comes out of this investigation, I think you just hit the nail on the head. We're going to find out there was no collusion, there was no conspiracy, there was no criminal liability. But what we may find out is the FBI relied, to the detriment of Americans, on information that was incapable of belief or corroboration, and they used that information to spy on Americans. That is unlawful. That's what's probably going to come out of this whole thing, is if anything, the FBI is going to have egg on their face, not the people they're investigating.
No.
I
got to run, Richard. Make it real quick. Sorry.
I just think that's absurd to say that. I think if the FBI had a reason and they went to a judge and the judge issued a warrant for somebody to spy on them, then they should. That's about our national security.
We need to know whether it was legit or not. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you.
Thanks.
Sneaky we go. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Brad. Samantha.
South Korea giving President Trump credit for their new meetings with the North. But could Pyongyang's real aim be to drive a wedge between the U.S. and the South? Plus, there is this.
What are you doing? Can you explain?
So what's going on here? Why a teacher was arrested after speaking up at a school board meeting. What's that about?
I am way smaller than you.
Law enforcement officer shoving a teacher to the ground outside of a school board meeting right before it happened to the teacher. Deshia Hargrave questioning the board about why the superintendent is getting a raise but not the teachers. She was ruled out of order and agrees to leave, but seconds later, this happened in the hallway outside.
Can you explain?
Stop resisting.
I am not. You just pushed me to the floor.
Well, she was arrested and booked, and the school board said it will not press charges, but the Louisiana Association of Educators now talking about next steps with her.
Sorry about that.
Next steps. There you go.
Okay, that's because I dropped my phone. That's what you heard. It's one of those days. New signs of a possible thaw between North and South Korea. The two sides face to face for the first time in 2 years, with South Korea's president praising President Trump's efforts to bring them together. Quote, I think President Trump deserves big credit for bringing about the inter-Korean talks. It could be a resulting work of the U.S.-led sanctions and pressure. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters is a Fox News strategic analyst, and he joins us now. Colonel.
Hi, Sandra.
So South Korea is giving the president a lot of credit here. Is that where the credit is due?
Well, there are two aspects of that. The first is that the administration's hard line on North Korea has startled the North Koreans and unsettled them. And so there's definitely some credit due there. But the other thing is that President Moon of South Korea has realized how you deal with President Trump. You praise him, and he's making sure to do that.
I suppose that's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, are you optimistic that these talks are going to lead to progress?
No, they're absolutely not going to lead to progress. This is North Korea doing two things. One, trying to drive a wedge between us and the South Koreans. And secondly, and most importantly, this is North Korea buying time for their missile and nuclear programs, because they have figured out that this is more effective than just insulting us and threatening to attack us. By starting negotiations, even negotiations over Olympic participation and minor issues, it makes it ever harder for us to take military action should we have to do so, should we be compelled to do so. So essentially, by opening negotiations with the South and dragging them out, on again, off again, it really complicates our strategic posture.
In the Wall Street Journal this morning, a piece by Jerry Seib talks about the administration weighing a risky strategy. In a piece titled, Amid Signs of a Thaw in North Korea, Tensions Bubble Up, Seib writes in that piece, the idea is known as the bloody nose strategy. React to some nuclear or missile test with a targeted strike against a North Korean facility to bloody Pyongyang's nose and illustrate the high price the regime could pay for its behavior. The hope would be to make that point without inciting a full-bore reprisal by North Korea, Colonel.
That would be utterly stupid. I mean, really, really, really bad idea. And it's been attributed to H.R. McMaster, which is very disappointing, our national security advisor. But I'm sure that SecDef Mattis, Jim Mattis, would never go along with that. Because if you try to do a bloody nose strike, a surgical strike, the North Koreans would be compelled to respond and escalate, and then we would have to decide whether we're going to escalate. We don't want war with North Korea. We don't want a military confrontation. But if it comes to it, if to protect American lives, we have to take military action, you've got to do it right. You've got to do it comprehensively and broadly and hit them so hard that they cannot respond, cannot wage an attack on South Korea or Japan, which they would do in the wake of a bloody nose surgical strike. I mean, this is ludicrous thinking. It's not strategic. It's a fantasy world. And again, we don't want a war with North Korea. But boy, if we have to have one, we got to do it right and win it as fast as possible.
Well, the president
No
has
mercy.
reiterated there is a military option, but that's the last option.
Yes,
Simon continues to write in this piece what the key question is when it comes to these talks between the North and the South, asking the question whether the conversation can actually expand beyond the Olympics to include other topics Seoul wants to discuss, notably reunification of Korean families, split between the North and the South, and a general lowering of hostility. So you just wonder where these talks eventually go, Colonel. But for now, South Korea saying credit due to the president, President Trump, for making them happen. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
All right, in a moment here, John Scott's coming up and happening now. Quick preview of what's on tap. Hey, John, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill Hemmer. President Trump meeting with his cabinet next hour on the heels of an unprecedented day at the White House. Cameras rolling on those key immigration talks. We will see what results today. Plus, deadly mudslides in Southern California. How folks there are dealing with back-to-back disasters. And a terrifying school bus fire caught on camera. Flames and smoke pouring out of windows and doors. I'll tell you what happened there. Top
Good
of the
deal.
hour.
See you in 10 minutes. Thank you, John. The appointment of Neil Gorsuch at the Supreme Court got all the headlines, but there are signs President Trump is getting ready to reshape the judiciary.